Twisted Metal is a long-running PlayStation-exclusive franchise that takes a roster of colorful characters and puts them against one another in a battle to the bitter, explosive end, for the prize of one wish that is without any limits to size, value, or even reality. All of it organized by the mysterious and enigmatic figure known as Calypso. Just about every entry in the series follows that formula, but to varying degrees of success and quality. One of the games that is generally considered to be of a greater success and quality in the entire series is Twisted Metal Black, released in 2001. Twisted Metal Black is a game known for many things, not least of which is the unique way it combines speed, strategy, and skill to create an action-packed and viscerally satisfying experience. However, the sheer blistering pace the game runs at is often jarring and difficult for new players to adjust to. So what if we toned that ridiculous beat down just a bit? What if we removed every notion that skill is required to play this game? What if we beat Twisted Metal Black as a filthy, filthy camper? The game is more or less an arena brawler where the characters are cars. The maps are designed to allow for the most exciting and fluid gameplay possible. The game rewards an aggressive style of play, because in Black, the best defense is an unceasing offense, which means that in this video, what I aim to accomplish is to spite just about every element of the core gameplay. I am to beat the game by any means necessary. The only rule is I can't engage in combat while moving. Now for this challenge, it didn't take long to decide on a vehicle to use. There's only one that I can think of that can maximize a coward's way to play: Spectre. More specifically, because of her special weapon, the Ghost Missile. It's basically just a beefed up fire missile that is unbothered by things like walls or the ground. Which brings us to my plan for this challenge. Operation Spectre, I barely know her. It goes like this. Since the Ghost Missile will tunnel its way through anything to get to its target, all I have to do is find my way to a safe hidey hole. From there, I can spam the infinitely regenerating Ghost Missiles until the competition is fully taken out. The only problem is finding a sufficiently safe hidey hole on each map. This is simple enough for some maps, but will lead to some downright ridiculous results on others. But first, if you haven't already, check out my other Twisted Metal Black videos where I've played through the game as Junkyard Dog, Outlaw, Grim, and others. And please be sure to hit that like button and do unspeakable acts of horror to the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it. And don't be shy in the comments either. Tell me any fun challenges you want to see me try. And without further ado, let's do further with me, Decidue, and see how badly we can confuse this 22-year-old video game. And we can start with a little backstory on Spectre's driver. After all, this may take a while, so it wouldn't hurt to get to know the woman behind the wheel. Her name is Bloody Mary, a name that plays on her deadly obsession of finding hot singles in her area to get married to. She's been woefully unsuccessful to this point, but there are plenty of pigs in the slaughterhouse. She remains hopeful, but she's also the product of a horrifically toxic and abusive upbringing, full of bullies calling her a fat, ugly cow, and a father who constantly bombarded her with the idea that her value as a human is directly tied to how pretty she is. Also, he killed her mom, but she seems like fine with that, I guess. One day she forgot to take her medication before attending a friend's wedding. One thing led to another, and she ended up in Blackfield Asylum with the rest of the unfortunate souls of Twisted Metal Black. Her first attempts at courting a crush were in grade school, when her efforts led to a boy saying, quote, "I would never kiss you in a million years, you ugly fat cow," end quote, before pushing her down into the mud. In earlier versions of her cutscene, she is shown beating him with a lead pipe, but this was cut for going a little too far, even for a game as dark as Twisted Metal Black, and BM took that about as well as you would imagine. Mary has grown more and more bitter that the world around her has access to love and affection while she feels like she's stuck on the outside waiting for her turn. So that's our companion through this tireless journey. Grab your tents and sticks for marshmallows because we're going camping. Starting off on the first level, the Scrapyard. Among the hills of broken car parts and discarded trinkets of yesterday, we find the Pizza Boy statue, a massive hunk of smiling green metal suspended from a crane. For the good of this run, we must sacrifice the Pizza Boy, for his shadow remains will form a ramp that will send us to salvation. And by that I mean he'll help us get to the top of the crusher where enemies can't get me. His wreckage now plays perfect. We can now assume the mounted position atop the crusher. This took a fair few tries because of the enemies being hyper aggressive and the overall speed of Spectre being much quicker than I thought. Once up there, the plan was simple: sit and wait for my special to stack up and then unleash hellfire. This was easy enough at first. The enemies were far enough away that the homing on the Ghost Missile had no issue locking in and finding their target. At the beginning of stages, it seems the AI doesn't like to completely overwhelm the player and only look to attack when you enter their vicinity. But as the field thins and there are less and less enemies, they tend to get more and more willing to hunt down the player. This is not usually an issue for a normal playthrough, but for this filthy camper run, it means that they eventually started to bunch up on the ground just below the platform I was hiding on, which just so happened to put them out of view of my hungry Ghost Missiles. So my next option was to try the other hidey hole, in the sewers that become accessible after you force an emergency landing on an airliner circling the map. The sewer rumor seemed to work well for a moment, but Sweet Tooth found me there very quickly, which I guess is fitting since it's the same place where you can unlock Yellow Jacket, who is his father. So that left me to go back to the Crusher platform and just do what damage I could. Thankfully, the weapons that are available up there, the homing missile and the gas can, are both very capable of enabling my camping behavior. The homing missiles could consistently shoot almost directly down, and the gas cans provided a solid output, especially with the enemies as bunched up as they were. And a surprise help was the Crusher itself. I did end up dying a couple of times trying to get back onto the platform whenever I fell off, because it would take me several attempts to make it. What did you expect? I'm not doing this run because I'm a god tier master at this game, but at the end of it all, the competition stood no chance at the hands of my strategy of sitting in a corner while my magic missiles pummeled everyone. Moving on to the second level, Suburbs. This map gave me a little bit more of a challenge in terms of finding a suitable hidey hole. My first thought was to use the rooftops in the industrial area, because if I'm bad at car parkour, the AI is definitely bad at car parkour. Unfortunately, the reason this area was great for taking out opponents was because it allowed my weapons to consistently have line of sight on those enemies, but it also meant they had line of sight on me, so that wouldn't do. I eventually just ended up hiding in the room where you unlock Warthog, and as you might imagine, this took quite a few attempts to get into, which meant I was having to drive up the hill and through the carnival several times. And if I had to be stuck in an endless loop of jumping up and falling down, that didn't mean the Ferris wheel would have to be stuck in the same fate. So I set it free. It can find a new life at sea. Anyways, I made it to the hidey hole, hoping that enemies would be unable to follow me in there, and it turns out they couldn't. After waiting and watching the opponent's AI struggle to come to terms with the reality that I was sitting motionless in a room they have no means to access, so there I waited until my special regenerated enough times to destroy every enemy on the map. Although at the end, Crazy 8 made it pretty interesting when they used a satellite attack to breach the protective walls of my hidey hole. I'll have to keep that in mind for future hidey holes. With one final ghost missile sent out, it found a home in the bumper of Crazy 8 and brought him to a fiery end, completing the second level. Now we find ourselves in the third level, downtown. This is the first level where I legitimately did not have a clue where to hide when I began. My first instinct was to use the elevators that bring you to the second level of one of the office buildings. This provided me with the ability to fight opponents one at a time, but not on my terms. They would come up whenever they wanted, and I didn't have much way of protecting myself. This was truly the closest I have come to being a real Call of Duty style camper, waiting for enemies to enter a room where I'm waiting for them. It worked well enough, I suppose. That is until Sweet Tooth arrived, and this put me on edge because, as anyone who's played this game can attest to, Sweet Tooth is the last person you want to share a space with. Thankfully, he showed mercy and just drove off the building, but that proved one thing. This was no hidey hole, just an imposter. But I had no other place to hide. Well, not one that I knew of at the time. Enter our friend Axel, the man so overcome with guilt that he believes he must strap himself to a ridiculous machine that drags his feet across hot asphalt as a penance. This must also be why he pushed me with his actual power into a spot that I didn't know about before. Just below one of the bridges of that raised section I was just on is a small platform that appears to be something the developers didn't intend for someone to be on, given that there's no weapons or pickups available, but it was the perfect spot to allow me to rain my ghost missiles from beyond the grasp of the AI's understanding. The enemies were utterly baffled. All they could do was strafe back and forth down the empty streets of the business district, completely helpless and without answers. All it took now was waiting for enough of my special to regenerate to finish off the field, and I was on to my biggest challenge yet, Minion. This was the first part of this whole run that I was dreading. This was Minion Stadium. The whole conceit of this boss battle is that you are trapped in a tiny box with a raging lunatic in a tanker truck. Nowhere to hide, only a vague sense that you can run in order to avoid the inevitable conclusion of Minion dominating you with his overpowered flamethrower. What chance do I, a filthy camper, have to take him down? All of the most important discoveries made in history have started with a single action: to try. So I did. I planted myself in a corner and just opened fire on Minion and his force field. Somehow he exposed every panel I needed almost immediately, and even though he killed me, I had taken down his shield, which left me on my second life to just run around gathering weapons. I picked up every power missile and mega guns I could find, and then just sat in a corner and let it all go. And wouldn't you believe it, it worked. Without firing a single shot while moving, I had taken down Minion. Moving on to level 5, Prison Passage. This is going to be a tricky one to start, since the map does offer a pretty decent hidey hole, but only after the progression of the level into its final form. It starts in a tiny box that doesn't open up for about a minute or so. So I'm trapped in there with a couple of opponents, and it's only through sheer luck and evasive maneuvers that I was able to escape onto the larger boat section. Still, the ship itself does not provide much in terms of hidey holes, but after some more evasive maneuvers, I got on top of this weird fence thing above the ramps of the ship. It gave me just enough protection from would-be attackers, but not perfect. Yellow Jacket took the opportunity to sneak some cheap shots in, the coward. He eventually ran off to bother someone else, which gave me just enough space to wait until the ship docked into port and opened up the full map. My hidey hole would be the room used to unlock manslaughter within the boat's belly. It was a large space, perfect for activities like driving back and forth and shooting ghost missiles at unsuspecting enemies from beneath them. You know, it's hard to tell from the enemy's perspective if they are annoyed afraid that I've broken the game, or if they are overwhelmed with confusion and fear that every few minutes or so a volley of magic missiles pour out of every direction with no warning. I'd like to think it's the latter. Anyways, I finished off the opponents and even took the risk of going outside that room to finish Sweet Tooth off, as I waited for him to find me. Now, this brings us to the 6th level, and let me tell you, this was one of the craziest experiences I've ever had playing this game. I've never seen the game fall apart this way before. It was like the Matrix unfolding in front of me, only to reveal that it's all just shitposts and crispy memes. A game like Twisted Metal Black is one that I always attributed some ethereal quality to. Something about it just seemed to exude some element of mystery and enigma, but this level exposed it all for what it is. Silly computer code being silly. I knew the best hidey hole would involve me straddling the side of a mountain, so after countless failed attempts to find a section of cliff kind enough to let me ride it like a little pony, I found a few decent places to saddle up. They seemed to work well enough, I suppose, protecting me from enemy fire and whatnot, but I need something that would really give me a chance, a place that will instill the disease of madness on my opponents, causing them to cast themselves into the unblinking abyss. Luckily, I found this gem of a spot. On the side of the map that has the thunderstorm, there's a little tiny piece of map sticking out with a health pickup. Taking the risk to slowly roll just beyond the hill, you can sit right there on the edge. Enemies can't get to you, and as a bonus, for some reason, collision just stops working when cars are in this spot. Sometimes opponents would join me on that slope and just phase right through me. Their weapons wouldn't lock on and would just completely ignore me, except for AoE damage, so Axle Special and gas cans could still prove dangerous. The opponents are more than capable of getting into the area just above my new hidey hole, and would even venture a little further to try to get a crack at Old Spectre. But again, their weapons were the useless tools of mere mortals, as I have transcended above them. They would drive over to me, shoot something, miss, turn around like they were going to leave, stop, turn towards me again, try one more time to shoot me, hoping this time it would work. It wouldn't, and then they would drive away and go back up the hill into the main part of the map, before jumping back down to try it all over again. But the best part was this. On their way back down to me, they would sometimes have way too much speed and just fly off into the void. Some say it's just a fun AI quirk. Others say it was them finally breaking down and deciding their only escape from the hell of Twisted Metal Black was the sweet release of death. Who's to say? This took a few tries to finally take out every opponent, since I would fall off myself pretty often, but it made for more chances to watch a helpless enemy yeet themselves into the Shadow Realm, and it never got old. Eventually I got it all down, used a few environmental attacks to spice things up, and just watch and wait while they one by one threw themselves into oblivion. So now we find ourselves on the penultimate level, Abandoned Skyscrapers. Another map that I didn't have a plan for going in. I was just hoping I could find another ridiculous spot to cheese the game away, by frustrating the opponents to the point that mingling with nothingness would be the more appealing option than dealing with my bullshit. And, as is customary anytime I played Twisted Metal Black, I fell off the map a few times. It actually didn't take long for me to find an area of the map fitting for such an exercise. There's a place on the lower section of the map, in the shadow of that weird church, where a power missile is dangling off the edge. Next to that power missile is a piece of wall sticking out from the building that provides just enough cover to protect my car, and is close enough to the edge into instant death that the AI refuses to go far enough down that path to being able to do damage to me. So they would all just drive full speed towards me before stopping just as they come into line of sight, then drive back to the other end, turn around and come back. And for a little while, they're doing it all in synchronous fashion, like an elegantly choreographed dance. They would ebb and flow in harmony and rhythm, until one of them tries to freeze me, but instead frees someone else, and their momentum carries them off into the warm embrace of the void. Rinse and repeat, maybe throw in a few ghost missiles to still show that I have the controller in my hands, and you have a camper's paradise. When it got down to only a few enemies, they would have a harder time pushing each other off the map, but that didn't stop them from doing it themselves. I didn't get to see it up close, but Yellow Jacket just straight up drove off the building on a completely different section of the level for like no reason. All I can see is Icon diving at speed until it vanished, giving way to the text prompt that he had been destroyed. That left just me and Crazy 8, who was content with just patrolling the path back and forth indefinitely. So I just blasted him with a couple of Cupid's arrows, and off we went into the final level of the game. The boss battle against Warhawk. A whole ass helicopter. This battle is actually much easier to take on as a filthy camper, as it takes place on a small circular building with only 2 places for cover. So naturally that meant even for the casual playthrough, it would involve sitting behind that cover for long periods of time. And with Spectre's ghost missiles being well suited for taking on tankers, I could just chill in my armored box, shoot a few tanker trucks and destroy Warhawk's shield, then take on the big fella himself. The ghost missiles also worked incredibly well against Warhawk, as they are one of the few weapons that I've found to actually consistently home in on him, making pretty quick work of him. I really thought the boss battles would be like way harder. Like, I struggle on a normal playthrough, so why is it so easy? Anyways, the destruction of Warhawk grants Spectre an audience with Calypso, where he presents her with the man that he claims will be her Prince Charming. But even though Calypso surgically altered the man's brain, he still could not bring himself to love BM. So she responds by killing the man with the club, and that's how I beat Twisted Metal Black, by removing every aspect of gameplay that makes it fun, by being a filthy, filthy camper. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, all those YouTube things, because if you enjoyed this video, that's the way to encourage me to make more of them. Thank you so much. Have a great day.